Hello everyone, I'm Ioannis and welcome to this part of the strategy guide for Lords of the Realm 2. Today I'm going to be talking about all the units in the game. There are of course 7 units in this game, excluding the siege weapons. Peasants, Macemen, Crossbowmen, Swordsmen, Pikemen, Archers, and Knights. Each unit has its advantages and its disadvantages. Each unit can be used in certain situations and not in other situations. Some are good for attack, some are good for defense, some are good for long-range defense, and some are good for digging. We'll be exploring all these aspects of the units of Lords of the Realm 2. I hope you enjoy this particular guide, and without further ado, let's start.
We'll be shot to pieces!
The most basic unit in the game is of course the Peasants. As we see the stats here, and by the way, these stats are taken from a site which should appear on your screen right now. These stats are not mine and they are not official, but I think they are accurate. They have the lowest attack and lowest defense of any unit in the game, except the Archers, but the Archers are a different story, and a speed of 3. They are very average. As we see here, they get obliterated by pretty much everyone, and they are incapable of dealing any notable damage. Many people say that you can use them as cannon fodder. Personally, I kind of disagree. The reason for that is because they don't last at all. Maybe you can use them as a pillaging army. As we see here, you can use a small army of peasants to slaughter enemy villagers before you attack them with your main army. But beyond that, I don't think there's much you can do. Digging is basically out of the question. They will die almost immediately, and for all intents and purposes, I think you should be using some other unit instead of peasants.
Come on, chaps!
Crossbowmen are one of the 2 long-range units in the game, and essentially here the question is, what should you be using, crossbowmen or archers? Now we see here that in the middle of the battlefield, in an empty landscape, they got obliterated by the Macemen. We'll see in a bit that this is going to change in the corner. This means that crossbowmen, when they are defended somehow, if you use the landscape to your advantage, you can maximize their effectiveness. They have a slow rate of fire. They deal more damage per bolt than the respective damage of arrows of archers. And we see that when it comes to enemy melee units, they do better than the archers. In fact, we see here that they even managed to beat the swordsmen in the open field. I even tried to control the swordsmen in order to attack the crossbowmen. The reason for that is because I wanted to make sure that the swordsmen would do their best and they would not do anything stupid. But we see here that even so, I lost the fight. I dealt more damage than the computer did to me before, but still, in the end, well, I see that it was a very even fight, but in the end, I lost. This shows, however, that crossbowmen are really good against other melee units. The problem here is that, well, there are 2 problems here basically. Their range. They have a much shorter range than archers. And we'll see here that against archers, at least in the open field, they are going to lose. The reason for that is that their range is shorter, and therefore the archers can easily kite them, keep their distance, and harass them before they just stay there and attack. In fact, you could go on kiting them like forever, and especially against the computer, it will be very easy to kill them without suffering any major casualties. So The archers have a longer range of fire, which also means that they are better when it comes to defending castles, where you want to maintain your distance. Also, let's not forget that crossbows cost. They need iron to be built. We see here 10 iron and 6 wood, as opposed to bows that only need, if I remember correctly, it's 13 wood. So that means that if you only have one county, let's say at the beginning of the game, and that county for some reason doesn't have iron, maybe it doesn't have any second resource, or maybe they have only stone, then archers are your main option. We also see here that against knights in the open field they got obliterated. However, crossbowmen are very powerful against knights when they are defended. We see here that in this situation they are defended in the bridge and they totally killed the knights.
Ready, my lord?
Macemen. Now, I must admit, when I was testing these fights, I was surprised when I saw that basically the Macemen managed to really beat the Swordsmen. I didn't expect that. And we see that 200 against 200, and I even tried to control the Swordsman myself, and still the result was the same. The Macemen lost less than 100 men, while the Swordsmen lost everyone. This means that in melee fight, Macemen are better than Swordsmen. Against Pikemen, the result was more or less the same. They have low defense. We see that they have a defense rating of 2, but they have a very high attack rating of 4, and they are also very fast. So basically they are the second strongest unit in the game after knights. We'll talk about, we'll make a comparison between Macemen and knights later on. For now, we see that against archers, they of course beat the archers in the open landscape. In fact, relatively easily. They can get to them very fast. The archers have a very low defense rating, so they get killed. And even in the corner of the map where the archers are supposed to be a little bit better defended, they still lost. At a cost of 4 iron and 4 wood only, I would say they are, maybe, I would even go as far as to say they are the best unit in the game. Because, let's face it, with this kind of stats, they are very, very good. And here we see them against knights, and we're gonna see that even against them they were quite competent. You can check the casualties on the bottom right. It was a very even fight, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's even possible to win this fight if you play it correctly, if you micromanage the fight. An excellent unit overall. Swordsmen. I must admit, I was rather disappointed by the Swordsmen. Here we see them against Pikemen. 200 Swordsmen against 200 Pikemen. The result was very disappointing for the Swordsmen. They are going to lose the fight in the end. It's a very even fight, but they lost. With an attack of 3 and defense of 4, I was expecting something much better than that. They are also quite expensive, 10 iron and 3 wood for what they offer. It's true that they are kind of resistant to the arrows of archers. Not kind of, they are resistant. I should be fair with them. But at the end of the day, why? Why should you choose swordsmen? If they lose, they have already, we saw earlier that they lost to the macemen. We saw that they lost to the pikemen. We see here, yes, they are gonna beat the archers because they can get to them fast and they can surround them and kill them, especially because the archers have a very low defense rating. But at the end of the day, I think you can do the same thing with another unit, and in particular the Macemen, that also feel nicer to control because they are faster. We see here against the Knights, as was expected, they were basically destroyed by the Knights, despite the fact that their only difference is supposed to be the horse. It's not.
Let's get digging!
Pikemen, as the sound you just heard implies, are very good for digging situations. We see here that against archers they are very, very effective. The reason for that is because they have a very high defense rating. In fact, it's the highest in the game. They have a low attack rating, on the other hand, which means that they are not really ideal for melee situations, even though they did manage to beat the Swordsmen, as we saw earlier. And the fact that their speed is only 1 makes them a little bit difficult to control, especially given the very bad pathfinding system of the game. Remember that the game is very old. But they basically have their uses. It's the best unit to dig moats. We see here that against Knights they didn't do very well. I was expecting something better. And if you think about it, in most games Pikemen do very well against enemy riding units, but not in this particular case. But this is not really important in this game.
We'll enjoy this.
Here we see archers against knights. We've already seen them against every other unit in the game. Yeah, as was expected, they basically got obliterated by the knights. This is obviously not the ideal way to use knights. Even in the corner of the map, they didn't stand a chance against knights.
We will fight together, and we shall win together.
Some final thoughts before we close this video. I must admit, for me, my favorite unit are the knights. We see here that they are a bit expensive. Buying mail is a little bit expensive, 88 crowns, but I think that for what they offer, they are a very good unit. They are very fast, very powerful. Essentially they beat everyone, at least in normal situations. And if it's important for you to use speed in order to get behind enemy lines, we see here, for instance, in this fight against a much stronger opponent, stronger at least in terms of numbers. He had a lot of a lot of villagers here, peasants that is. I managed to get behind them, kill the archers that were pretty much undefended, and by the time he decided to actually join the fight with his melee units, it was already too late. I managed to get away first. To be honest with you, I tried this fight normally without getting away, and I was losing. But if you go away, you can win, which means that you can easily use them to move around the battlefield and change, let's say, the terms of the fight. Something that is not very easy to do with any other unit, including Macemen. They are very fast as well, but they are just a little bit slower than knights. They are also, of course, much cheaper, 20 crowns as we saw here. And this is the continuation of the fight. I think that it's a little bit a matter of taste. If someone comes and tells me that they prefer Macemen, I wouldn't have any problem with it. This is perfectly understandable because they are much cheaper. That's the problem here. That's the problem that knights have. They cost a lot more to create yourself. However, they have better defense. And we see here that Macemen are a little bit vulnerable to archers. We see that if the archers are adequately defended, perhaps behind the bridge, they can deal massive damage to the Macemen, and in fact they can beat them even if they are outnumbered. So this is something to take into account. With knights, that would have been a little bit more difficult, I think. Obviously, because the reason mainly would be that knights would either be able to just get away fast or kill the defenders of the archers a bit faster. It's really a matter of choice in the end. Now, pikemen. As I said before, pikemen are very good at digging moats. I wouldn't use them for anything other than that. We see here that they are pretty resistant to the boiling oil, they are very resistant to archers. They are not as resistant to crossbowmen, so you might have problems in that particular situation. Speaking of crossbowmen, something that I failed to mention before, crossbowmen are very powerful against enemy siege weapons. This is something to think about when you choose how to defend a castle. But back to the pikemen. For me, they are one of the 3 essential units in the game. You need them for siege to besiege a castle, especially a castle with a moat, namely the stone castles and royal castles. Beyond that, I think you can do the same thing besides digging with the macemen. So for melee combat or for getting to archers or something like that, you should use macemen or knights if that's your choice. Swordsmen, I am convinced that they are pretty much useless. Now, someone might have a different opinion. I saw them lose pretty much to everyone else. They are quite expensive if you see the crowns that they require, and also the fact that they require both iron and a lot of iron and wood. And what they give in return is a unit that is relatively resistant to arrows. They are resistant to arrows, but they lose pretty much to everyone else, including macemen, including pikemen. And they are not much faster than pikemen. At the end of the day, I honestly don't see any reason to use swordsmen in this game unless you have a band of Swedish swordsmen in your county. Especially when it's 200. Here we see that it's 100. Especially when it's 200, it's really worth it. But only in these situations. I wouldn't recommend that you create the swords yourself. One last thing about swordsmen is that I think that they are much more efficient when you auto-calculate a fight and they are present than when you actually take the field. I don't know if this is a mistake of the game, but this is my impression at least. They do quite well in auto-calculated battles, especially if you have 200 swordsmen. They are pretty powerful. Archers. For me, archers are the 3rd essential unit in the game. And essentially what I'm saying here is that I prefer archers to crossbowmen. That's, I guess that's a little bit an objective matter. Someone might prefer crossbowmen. I prefer archers. The reason for that is because they are, first of all, they are cheaper, and you can build them, you can create them, you can create bows very early in the game, especially even if you have a county that doesn't have iron in it. Also, the long range means that they are exceptional at defending castles. Crossbowmen, maybe you can have a few in there in the castle just to take out siege weapons, but overall there is one problem with crossbowmen: their range. It's much shorter than for archers. So as we see here, for instance, if they want to attack, to shoot at the digging army of the enemy, they have to be right behind the rampart. That makes them vulnerable to enemy archer attacks. That means that you're gonna lose some crossbowmen when you defend in a siege, while archers can remain in the back and they are much safer than crossbowmen. It's true that crossbowmen fare a little bit better, in fact much better than archers in melee situations. But anyway, melee situations for long-range units are heavily frowned upon. You shouldn't do that. And at the end of the day, I think that crossbowmen, basically in melee situations, they're only going to beat the peasants and the archers, nobody else. So I'm not sure that's really worth it. I guess it's also a matter of taste, but at least me personally, I'm an archer kind of guy. The last question you have to ask yourself is maces or, macemen or knights. As I said before, for me it's knights. And I explained the reasons, I think. So, for me, 3 units. Maces or knights, depending on your choice. Archers to defend castles. And pikemen. Knights for everything, for melee fights, for storming castles, things like that. Pikemen for digging moats or to somehow defend against, to defend and become some sort of wall for the archers, and archers for defending or perhaps for harassing enemy armies before you take them out with your melee units, namely with your knights. So this was this strategy guide, this part of the strategy guide, the unit comparison. I hope you liked it. I expect that people will have their objections about certain things I said. This is something that is actually a good thing. It shows that the game is very good and not straightforward, or at least not completely. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you had fun. See you soon and take care. Goodbye.